Hi everyone, and welcome to the second practical webinar, where you will learn how to create your own website and deploy it in the internet, and basically master the basics of front-end developer profession. My name is Andrew, I'm CTO of Done IT Education, and today we will continue from the point where we left during the last webinar. Okay. I'm sharing my screen, and I suppose we can start. So everyone who wanted probably already joined, the rest will be able to see the video in the recording. So just to remind you, last time we talked about HTML and a bit about CSS. We learned several most popular HTML tags, and also I have shown you how to link CSS file to your HTML page. Also, we learned few basics CSS properties, and today we will continue from specifically that point. Just to remind you, I'm looking at your questions into the chat, so if you have any, you can either unmute your mic and speak up, or you can write them down into the chat. I'll try to answer all of your questions. Also reminding you that we have a WhatsApp group where you can ask any technical questions that you have. If you have any difficulties trying to create your own layouts at home, our mentor will help you in this. Okay, so today we continue from CSS, and last time we learned CSS structure. We learned what is selector. Basically, selector is part of the HTML file that we want to apply styles to. We learned several most popular properties, such as, for example, color and background color. I also shown you how the properties called margin, border, and padding work. So today we will start by learning few more of the most popular CSS properties, which most of which would be enough for you to create, well, some basic layouts. So let's start with some properties related to text and styling the text. I will write some comments in this file, so you can reference them later when you do your homework or your own projects. By creating this kind of syntax / asterisk, it's the start of a comment, and */ means end of the comment. Here, between these two lines, I can put absolutely everything I want. For example, font properties, it will be comment. Just for me, browser will ignore that, because if you will remove those, your IDE and browser will treat this line as a code, and well, basically it will fail, because that's not a code. This way we can create just a text comment for us to read later. So which font properties we need? There are several of them. Let's start comment here and end here. First one will be size, next one weight, and third one style. So all of these properties come with the font prefix. For example, if you want to change the size of your text, you can use property called font-size. I think we already did it somewhere. Yeah, so I can see that we applied different font size for our first level paragraph. Here's our web page. Let's try reloading it. Okay, probably I need to open it once again. I renamed the CSS file from styles CSS to example style CSS, so it later it doesn't mess up with the actual styles file that we will use for our landing page. Okay, so we are opening the page now, and here you can see that the styles that we created in CSS file are already applied. first level heading has a smaller font than it used to be. Then we have some color and background color applied to paragraph. And also we used margins, paddings, and borders on the other paragraph. So now we've already applied font size property to the first level paragraph, and let's deal with the other two font related properties. So the other two are font weight and font style. I remind you, this comes as a prefix, and then you can suffix it with any of these words. If we are talking about font weight, you will see several different properties here, and by default, all the headings are created in bold. So the value by default specifically for headers in browsers is bold. If I don't want it to be bold, I can put font weight normal, and here we will see that this heading is not bold anymore. Actually, you will see that there are more properties. Like there is not only like normal and bold, there is bolder, which is even more bold than default bold. Then there is lighter, which is like smaller than normal. And so these four are the most popular. But in order to see some difference, you need to have the font related to these properties installed in your operating system. For example, if now I will change normal to lighter and go back to the page, I won't see any difference because by default, let's check which font by default is used by the system here. So here I can see that if I didn't apply any like font family, by default, it uses Times New Roman font. And default Times New Roman font, it has only two font weights, normal and bold. If you create your own website, you can use a font that has several different thickness styles. And for example, you can apply one of them to be lighter, one of them normal, one bold, and another one bolder. So this way you will have 4 different types, like weight types for a single font. And actually browser allows you to keep up to 9 of them for each specific font. But for most of font, by default, there are only 2 of them, normal and bold. So I will change this back to normal because lighter actually doesn't do anything in this case. And again, to remind, the most commonly used properties are either normal or bold. By default, all text is created with font weight normal, and all headings are created with font weight bold. But using this property font weight, you can reverse it if it is needed. And finally, we have font style. So for font style, it's even more simple. For font style, well, actually, there are several properties here as well. I, for example, never used oblique. If someone uses this, it is only to apply to make the font italic. So let's try putting it font style italic. And now you can see that our font has some curve, so it became italic. If I comment that or I remove this property, it again becomes normal font. So these are the 3 most common properties that are used to style your fonts, basically all your text on the website. Well, there is a 4th one, which doesn't have font prefix, which is called color, but we already learned about it. So if you want to change color of your font, you just use color and provide any color name or color code. In terms of color names, there are about up to 100, I don't remember the exact number, or several dozens of colors that you can see here. like already predefined for you that have predefined names, for example, Firebrick. But if you want to use your custom color, will be most likely the case for your own website. You can, for example, click here and choose on the palette any color you need. And basically you can provide color in the way of 16 digit, not 16, like 6 or 8 digits code, so-called hex code. So for example, here's hex code for the colors that I selected. If I select different color, it will show you different hex code. On pressing enter, this color code will be applied here. So you can use it or you can change it using this palette at any given time. Okay, so for fonts, I hope it is clear. And basically, we have color, we have background color, we also have margin, padding, and border, and those are like those three groups are the most commonly used CSS rules. Before starting to create the layouts that I showed you last time, we need to learn one more thing. It is how to place your content into several columns, because last time I already told you that there are two different types of HTML tags. One of them are like block tags, which take the whole width of your screen, and the other one is string tags which basically go one after each other, and they only take the width of their content. But what do we need to do, for example, if we need to have two paragraphs in two different columns? The easiest way as of today to do this is to use a system called Flexbox. So in CSS, there is a special system called Flexbox. Let me put it here in a comment. Flexbox, and to create some Flexbox layout, what we need is to provide several properties. First of them is we need to use display property and provide the value of flex to our parent container, inside which you want to have several different columns. And the most two popular Flexbox properties are align items and justify content. By default, if you use this piece of code, well, of course, for align items, you need to provide some value here. There are several of them. And for justify content, again, you can provide one of several values. By default, align items define how you center your content vertically, and justify content defines how you center your content, how you adjust your content, place your content horizontally. So let's check it on some of the examples. For example, here we have two paragraphs of text. Let's adjust their layout so they go into two columns. In order to do that, I need to give them a common parent tag, reminding you it's a div, one of the most common block tags. It allows me to wrap some other tags, but for now, just wrapping it with div won't do anything on our page. So for now, layout won't change. But in order for it to change, I need to provide some styles for this div. In order to do it, I will provide it some class. Let it be, I don't know, let it be articles. Assume that we have news website and we need to have two columns of articles. So I go back to CSS and create a code for articles. So first thing I need to do is, so yeah, miss letter T here. So first thing I need to do is to create, as I've said, create some parent component for the two divs that I want to have in separate columns, and to provide it styles, this style display flex. So for now, if we check our content on the web page, you will see that it's already in two different columns, because second paragraph has lots of content and first paragraph only has 2 words. By default, second one takes almost all of the available space. But if, for example, I will reduce the amount of content here or increase amount of content in the first paragraph, let's do it now. You'll see that their widths will automatically adjust. I will put some more text to the first paragraph using lorem command that I've shown you last time. And let's see the result. So now you will see that these two paragraphs are going perfectly into two almost equal size columns. You will see some like margins here, but that's because we created, we basically last time created specific margins and paddings for our second paragraph. If we remove those, let's try just unticking the checkbox here, and let's remove the padding. You will see also border, we don't need the border. So you will see two absolutely similar divs. So let's go back and enable everything as it was before. So where we can use Flexbox, well, we can use it like literally everywhere. For example, we have a number of inputs below. Let's apply flex layout to them as well. So I'm finding inputs here, and in order to apply flex layout to them, I'm doing absolutely similar thing. So I wrap all of them into one div, and I will provide it some class. Let the class be called inputs. Okay. So now I'm creating some styles for it, for inputs. Again, the first thing we need to do is some parent container. We need to provide it a property called display with the value of flex, and let's see how it works so far. So now you can see that those inputs are on a separate line because we wrapped them in a separate div. Previously, they were on the same line as this button. But in terms of their layout, nothing has changed. They're still going one after each other. So here we can start using the other properties that I've shown you, specifically align items and justify content. If we use justify content, we can say to the browser how we want to adjust this content horizontally. And for example, one of the commonly used property values is center. If I want all inputs to be in the center of the page, so now you can see that all the inputs are perfectly centered inside the page. And if, for example, I increase page width, you see they are still staying in center. Another one commonly used value for justify content is space between. Space between means that we are putting those items somewhere on the line with even spacing between them. So let's see it on the example. When I'm putting space between, you see first one goes on the very left, last one goes on the very right, and there is absolutely even amount of spacing between all of them. If one of them becomes bigger, then still spacing will remain the same, because that's what browser does automatically. Second property is align items, which allows us to vertically adjust them. And let's, for example, put here center as well. But probably we won't see any difference, because all of these inputs, like all of these elements, have the same height. But for example, if their height was different, then we would definitely see a difference. So let's see how align items works based on this example. Let's go to our articles and put align items here. Oh, sorry, I muted for a second. So we are putting, for example, align items here. And so now we probably won't see the difference, but you can see that the first, like, let's select the parent. So if we select the parent, and then we can see that, assuming the margin of the second paragraph, we can see that both of these paragraphs are going into the center. If I change align items, if, for example, I want both items to be on top, I can put the property called flex start. And here you can see some hints from the browser. So when I put flex start, you see, instead of stretching and instead of centering, the first paragraph like went a little bit up. If I want to put it in the end, I can use flex end, and you see the second paragraph, or first paragraph went down to be in the end of the page, and not the page, but in the end of this parent flexbox block. And again, if I put center, they would be perfectly centered. They visual are not, but that's because of the bigger margin on the second paragraph. But you'll now see how to apply these materials in practice on the layout that we will create. Okay, so let's go back into the code. And at this point, I think we are ready to start creating the layout that I was showing you last time. Just to remind you, here it is. It's a website for food delivery content. Again, just in case you lost it, I'll share link into the chat. And as of now, I think we can already start creating that. We will need to learn few more properties related to the background, and how to create, for example, background image, how to perfectly place your background on the page. But we'll do that once we come to the second block. So at first, let's take a look at the website that we will be creating. And let's try to structure what we will be doing right now. So the first thing you need to do when creating any of the website, well, first of all, you need to have a design. Once you have a design, you need to take a look at it, and you need to visually split this design into different blocks, starting with big blocks that create basically most of your page content, and then visually split all of those blocks into some smaller elements. And you go from the bigger ones to the smaller ones until you finish with some text or images. So let's visually start creating layout, like splitting it into blocks. Block is basically some rectangle that goes that takes whole width of the page. For example, here we have header. So the area that is currently hovered as violet, this would be our first block that we will be creating. In its turn, it will consist of two other smaller blocks. One of them will contain logo, and the second block will contain all the right parts, like all the icons that are in the top right. In its turn, this right block will consist of three other smaller blocks, like login button, card button, and menu button. And login and card buttons will also consist of two even smaller blocks, one of which will contain the icon itself, and another one will contain text. So let's try doing that on practice. First of all, I won't delete anything that I've created so far. I'm just closing these files. And first of all, to start with the layout, I will create a new HTML file, and we will now start doing everything from scratch. So what I do is I'm right-clicking the folder, reminding you, selecting the first option, new, and I'm creating HTML file, and I will call it index. By default, the file called index.html considered to be the main file of the project. And for example, when you deploy your application to some web server, those web servers usually look for index.html file in the root of your project. And if they find it, they put it as your main page of your website. You'll see how it works during our last final webinar on Friday. Okay, so it says that we can now select a title. Let's call it food delivery, and that's it. We are ready to start creating our layout. We have some basic code for a beginning, and to remind, everything that you will actually see on your screen will be placed inside body. So I told you that first step is to visually create some bigger blocks out of which our website will consist. So let's do it right now. For example, I will create first div and write inside it header. Header will represent this part. Later, I'll remove the words header, and instead of those, I will put the actual code, like to create these styles. So next, this part, let's call it main. I'll create another div. We'll call it main. Next, we have another block, which is called restaurants. Another div called restaurants, and the next block will be called, well, anyway, it doesn't really matter right now. We just need it for us. So we'll call it search, and so on. There will be some other blocks, but I won't create them so far because I'm not sure we'll have enough time to complete all of the web page. So we'll probably finish with the first 3 or 4 blocks. And once we created that, let's already open our web page. By the way, you see that I've provided in the code, I have provided title. Tag called title inside head for a web page. I have put there food delivery, and here in the browser you will see that the tab name is actually represents the titles that we created. So food delivery is written here, and what we did so far is we created 4 different blocks that will later be converted into some into basically some sections. And let's start with the header. So first of all, as I've said, we have a special block for header, but if we look inside it, we can see that it's contained from the left part and the right part. So let's inside header, let's now start writing code for header. Inside header, I know that we have 2 other blocks. This first one will contain logo. Second one will contain icons. This is kind of pseudo code for now, but soon we will turn it into the actual code. So now we have logo and icons. Now we are looking for logo. There is only logo image and that's it. There are no more other elements here. But for the right parts, we have like 3 different sub blocks inside the right block. So for icons, I will actually create 3 more blocks. Here, first one is login, second one is card, and third one is menu. But instead of writing pseudocode, let's already start with the actual code. And what I already told you is that if we look at each of the icons, like each of these icons, those consist of 2 different parts. First, we have the icon itself, and then we have the text on the right. So for the first 2 blocks in the right part of the header, I can say that they consist of 2 more blocks. Here we will have the text called login, and here we will have 0. Instead of this div, I will actually put an image. Because we have an icon there, so we can perfectly use an image here. And for the third element, we also, instead of div, we also can use an image, because we will be providing styles for we will be creating this menu as an image. This will be more simple for now. So that's almost it. We have created the HTML structure for the header. So what we need to do right now is we need to provide some source for the images. In order to do that, we need to download those images from Figma. And put here a link to the downloaded files. In order to make it faster, I already pre-downloaded all those images, actually all the images from the web page, and put them inside my project. For example, you can see in the image folder, previously we had only one file, cat balcony, that we used in our example project, but now we have several folders. For example, there is a folder called icons. Here we have card icon, we have user. Now let's use user SVG. We have user icon, and so on. There are a few more other icons from the lower blocks. So now I can use those. If you didn't download the images yet, you can do that directly in Figma in the following way. So first, what you need to do is to click on some image that you want to download. If you can click specifically on the image or cannot select what you want, here on the left part, you have an explorer where you can select like more top or bottom layers. So, but for me, this one should be perfectly fine. You see, I'm selecting an image. Then in your Figma, there is in the right part, there is a third tab called export. And let's expand what we have here. And here we actually can export our image in one of the following formats. If you want to export an image to be used on your website, you definitely won't be needing PDF. You will need either PNG, JPG, or SVG format. For icons, we usually use SVG or PNG. For bigger images that do not require some transparency inside the image, we usually use JPG, but that's like more complicated topic to discuss, so let's not dive into deep details here. I will select PNG, the default option, and click export. And immediately I have a web archive downloaded. Let's try opening it. And you see that I have downloaded an image and it says yellow kitchen here. Let's make it a bit closer. So you can see we have a perfectly downloaded image. So you can do absolutely the same thing for all the rest of the images. For example, select this big background image and again download PNG, click export. And here we can see our main photo downloaded perfectly in PNG format. Same goes for icons. Icons usually downloaded and used in the SVG format, but as I've said, let's not dive into details here. So I have already downloaded logo, both icons, menu here, background image with the food, these three icons. But you see, for example, if you want to select one of these yellow icons, those are not combined, so I can select only knife and fork. And if I click export now, only knife and fork will be exported, but not the whole clock. So in this case, I need to go to Explorer and select somewhere up. For example, here we have 48 to 48. So here I can see like I'm selecting one of the parents, which represents the whole image. And this way, if I click here, when I see infographic parent, and then I click export, I will have a perfectly exported icon. Well, it's downloaded in an archive, not to waste time, I won't open it now. I have also downloaded photos from this slider and mottos, well, kind of logos of the restaurants. So I have already downloaded them, and all of them are here inside my project. You can do that now or later on when you watch the recording. Now let's try putting some source to the images that we have already created. We have logo PNG file. This is our logo. And I will use it as a source. Well, basically, for instead of div with logo, I can put image. I don't necessarily need to have div there. It can be absolutely any tag. Flexbox works with all types of tags. So here I will put. So here I will put file logo PNG from the folder called image. Again, reminding you, this is a relative path. I have HTML file in the root of my project. And then in the root, I have a folder called img. And inside it, I have file logo PNG. This way, using slashes as folder delimiters, I can provide path to any folder. And now let's provide sources for the other images. These ones should be somewhere in icons. For the login information, we need an icon probably called user SVG. That's correct. So you see it has a subfolder here. So the correct path to user SVG icon will be emg/icons/ and user SVG. So you need to put the full path there from your HTML file to the desired image. Second folder is cart. It's in the same icons folder, img, icons, cart, SVG. Okay. And third one is menu. Here I have, you see, here I have an icon for a menu called menu PNG. So the path to it will be img, icons, menu, PNG. That's it. Let's try seeing it on our website, what we have created. And basically, here's the result. So by default, we have just created an HTML layout, and any site without CSS will look something like this. You will see just a bunch of images and a bunch of text besides those. And now we need to use CSS and styles to perfectly style those on our page, to place them, for example, in different columns, to adjust some font size, and so on. So first, let's start with creating a CSS file that will be used specifically for this project. Just reminding you, I have renamed the file that we created last time from styles CSS to example style CSS, because that was like kind of a technical file. But the real one will be here. I'll create in style CSS. So this one will be used on our actual web page. Now let's link it to our web page using link tag. We need to provide relation to say what it is. It is a style sheet, and hyperreference to it is we have CSS folder, and inside it we have a file called styles.css. If we did everything correctly, it should already work, though we haven't provided any styles yet. Before we do that, another thing that I need you to check here is that we want to be like create a website specifically like fully as here in this example. We need to reset some default browser styles, because as you've seen on our example page, by default browser applies some styles to paragraphs, to headings, to, well, basically to many of the tags. Browser provides some defaults, and we don't want those because we have our own design. Well, actually, if you inspect the page, so for example, here we have our first div where we created everything related to the header. You will see that it doesn't start at the beginning of the page. It has margin from all three sides, from the left, from the right, and from the top. Where does this margin come from? If you select a body tag, you see, now I have selected body, like the whole body, and we can see that by default, like here we can see some text in italic. This is a styles provided by browser just by default to any web page. And by default, browser puts specifically Chrome, because other browsers might have different behavior, but specifically Chrome puts default margin of 8 pixels to the body of absolutely all web pages. Well, actually, we don't need that. So in order to remove it in our style CSS, what we can do is, for example, we can say body, and in this way we are providing styles for our body tag, and we can say margin please set margin to 0. Whenever you provide some CSS code, it overrides default browser styles. And this way, now you will see that all this margin, this 8 pixel margin from body, has completely disappeared. What usually developers do is they create some files that reset absolutely all of the browser default styling, just not to mess up with their own code. And the common way of doing this is called reset.css. So if you Google for reset CSS, the first result will be something like mayerweb.com. If you go here, CSS tools reset CSS, you will see a sample. You will see a sample CSS file that allows you to reset like almost all properties that are put, almost all styles that are put by browser as default. So you see there is the reset applies to HTML, body, div, span, and so on, to many different tags, like some other styles to body for L, UL, and so on. So what usually developers do is that they copy paste this file and put all that code in here. But well, not to mess up with your own code. Usually for that, they create a separate file. called something like reset.css. And I paste all the content in here. Just copy pasted the file from the web. Last time someone asked whether we can link several CSS files to a project, and this is specifically the case where we need several CSS files to be linked to one HTML web page. So I will now go and create another link tag. It's same style sheet, and href for it will be css/reset.css. Just one important thing, be sure that you put reset CSS before your file style CSS, because if you put it after, like this, you will create some styles here, and then reset CSS, it goes below, it means it takes precedence, it will overwrite all your styles and just reset those to 0. So be sure to put reset CSS as the very first CSS import of your project, and then you can import the rest of your files. Okay, so now in style CSS, we can remove this margin 0 for body. It will be done in a similar way by this reset CSS website. So you see nothing have changed here. And now we can start creating our styles for the header. Let's go. First, in order to create some styles here, we need to provide these divs with classes, because as I've said, using tags for styling in CSS is a very bad idea, because you will have many multiple occurrences of the same tags. That's why we need classes to distinguish between similar tags, because you already see that you can see that we already have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, we have about 10 divs, and while we continue creating our web page, the amount of divs will be higher and higher. So that's why we need to provide classes to them. First of all, let's provide class to our first level div. It's like the whole div representing our full header, and I will call it this way, header. Before providing classes to the other divs, let's just start with this one and provide some styles to it to see that actually everything is working. I'm providing styles for a class called header, just reminding you that in order to reference a class in CSS, you put dot, then class name. Class name should be without spaces, because if I put space here, this will be considered as a completely separate class. So we are saying dot header, it means class named header. And well, actually what we need to do now, in header, we have 2 sub blocks. And what we need to do is we need to place them in 2 different columns, because right now, by default, as those are contained in divs, those go one below each other, because each div takes full page content, and I need to place them into columns. In order to do that, I will apply style called display flex, the one that I've just shown you. And the result is, well, actually for now it's not as we expected, but it's already better. So we can see a logo here. We can see some of the icons on the right. These ones are not aligned yet, but anyway, we already have content in 2 different columns. By default, when you provide display flex property to some element, its children are aligned to have the same height. So you see, the height of this div is very big. That's why it stretches the logo inside. But we can override that with vertical alignment. We can put align items and put it to center. And now we can see that the right part, it has it has pretty big height, but the image is not stretched. Instead of that, it's perfectly placed in the center. So what do we need to do next? All these icons, they need to be in the right part of the page. For that, we are going to use the second property, second flexbox property that I've shown you. It's justify content, which is used to adjust the content horizontally. And I will put space between. So when you are using space between, just to remind, the first one will be in the start of the page, the last child will be in the end of the page, and the rest will be evenly distributed between them. If there are only two of them, they will be just pushed to different sides of the page. And that's actually what happens here. So we have a header, and we have left part of the header, which is perfectly pushed to the left, and right part of the header, which is perfectly pushed to the right. That's it. So we already did some first basic styling, and it works. So what are we going to do next? So you see this line below the header. There are several ways actually to create this line. We can, for example, create a div, set its height to 1 pixel, and put some background color to it. But the easiest way would be to just use a border, just to provide a bottom border for header, and this line will work this way as actually the bottom border. But in order to do that, we need to see and to define what is the color of this line. And actually in here, Figma will help you a lot. Figma is actually a tool. Figma is this like website and program we are working in currently. I mean, where you can see all this layout. It's a software where designers create their designs, and most likely when you become a front-end developer, you will receive some new designs in Figma or any similar software. It helps not only designers, but also developers as well. As you've seen, you can already download it, some images from here, but that's not everything that we have here. For example, if I select header, there is a second tab called Inspect. And if we scroll down, you can see some code. And this code, it is CSS. This is CSS code. Some parts of the code from here, you will be able just to copy paste inside your project. Everything that starts with position, like position absolute and width height left top, probably should be ignored by you, because Figma tries to create those properties by looking at the layout automatically. But usually those are not correct. So for example, these 5 properties are most likely should be ignored by you as a developers. But the rest one might be interesting. For example, we have background, and here is the back color code. Specifically, this one is for a white color. We don't see a border bottom here. It means that line here in this design is created as a separate element, which means we need to specifically go and select this line. And you see, if I select this line, Figma shows me its size, that it's 1440 pixels wide, and it has height of 1 pixel. If I go to the inspect section, as I've said, everything related to the position, we just ignore that. But below we can see a background, and we see a color code. So this is specifically the gray color, which we need to use for this line. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy this color, and for our header, provide a property called border bottom. It should be 1 pixel. Its size should be 1 pixel. Width of the border, it should be solid. and I'm pasting the color code here. If you are using color codes, just be sure to have a hash sign before the code itself. Otherwise, this way, you see, it won't work and will show to you as a mistake. Let's see what we have now. And you see, we have created this border bottom line. So far, everything goes fine. Let's continue. Do you have any questions so far at this point on how to use Flexbox or how to divide the page into blocks and bigger blocks into smaller blocks? Just if you have any questions, please write down in the chat. If you don't have any, we will move on. So what do we do next? As I've said, we are moving from outer blocks to the inner smaller blocks. We have created the header itself. We have already placed a logo inside. Now we need to adjust this right part. So currently, as those are placed in a separate divs, currently all the icons go vertically, one after each other. It means that we also need to put them into several columns. So what we do now will be absolutely the same number of the same steps that we did before. Here we have a wrapper div for all these three sets of icons in the right. I will provide it with some class. For example, let it be header actions. In the example that I created, I used some very simple class names, but here you can see that class names are actually meaningful. They say which content is contained inside. If you do it this way, it will be easier for you to maintain this code later. So I have header actions. I will go to styles and create some styles for these header actions. Same here. I put first just to put display flex, and let's see how it worked so far. You see, it's already much better. Those are already in 3 different columns. Of course, those need to be that layout needs to be further adjusted, but step by step, we are getting it closer and closer to how it actually looks like in the design. So the next step that we need to do is we need to put some spacing between those items, because currently they go just one after each other. In order to put some spacing, first we need to understand what spacing is between them. And Figma here will perfectly help us again. For example, if I select any item in Figma, let's select login text, and then I hover some other element, Figma will show you distance between those elements. For example, here between the text login and the next icon is the distance is 49 pixels. Again, I will check distance between these two items. Here it's 48. It's a small mistake from a designer. Usually all these distances should be equal, should be the same. So let's put 48 as a distance between flex elements. And basically, in order to do that, we don't need to use any margins or paddings, because Flexbox has a special property that allows you to set a distance that will be put between all flex elements. And this property is called gap. I'm putting gap 48 pixels, as we've seen now, and let's check the result. You see, we have now 48 pixels gap between those items, which is perfectly as we have in the design. That's very good. Next step that we need to do is to do absolutely same set of steps for the icons themselves, because in the icon, inside the icon, we have image and we have text called login. which text is placed in a separate div. That's why those are in two different lines. It means that we need to put display flags for the icon wrapper itself, and this way this code will be, those elements will be aligned horizontally in two different columns. So let's go ahead and do that. So now you are seeing that already what we are doing, it's a set of similar steps that will be actually repeated in all the other blocks below. We have two icons here. Let's put them some class. Let it be header icon. You see, I can put same class for several tags. I'm using the same class called header icon for two different divs. And now I will provide styles to it. Again, we need display flags. Let's see the result. Okay, so now it stretches the icon to the full height of header. In order to remove this default stretching, we use align item center. So those are perfectly aligned in the center of the page. And now we just need to put some spacing between the text and the icon itself, because it's very close. To see what this spacing is, I click on login and then hover on icon. And we can see here that the spacing should be 6 pixels. For this icon, it's 5 pixels. Again, it's a mistake. For designer, usually all spaces should be absolutely the same across the whole layout. I will put, for the spacing, I will put gap. Let's put it, for example, 8 pixels. And let's check it. Okay, so now we have perfectly aligned layout. Just if we will check the design here, let's see what the height of the header is. If I click the header itself, Figma shows me its size, 1440 width and 72 pixels height. So what I can do now is I can go back to header and set its height to 72 pixels. By the way, I didn't show you this property yet. Let's go back to the example styles CSS. I will just put two styles here. Width, let it be 100 pixels, and height, let it be again 100 pixels. So these are another two of the most commonly used properties. Width is used actually to provide the width of the element, and height to provide specific set height for element. We used this specifically for header because our header is 72 pixels high, and as we are using display flags and align item center, if the content's height is less, it will be perfectly aligned in the center of this div. I mean vertical alignment. Let's check it. Okay, so let's see it in browser. Now browser shows that our div is have height of 73 pixels. It's actually 72 pixels. The content is 72 pixels that we have provided, and additional 1 pixel is related to the border, the bottom border that we have created. But anyway, that suits us perfectly. It's like perfectly the same as in the design. What else do we need to do here? Like, you see, our header is almost similar to the design right now, but we need to do few more steps. First of all, you by default, all the text that you create, it's in black color. But here you'll be able to see that the text of the icons, it's not black, it's gray, like color of the text and of the icon is gray. So we can go ahead and change color of the text of our header icons to this one. In order to see which specific color is used, again, I'm selecting text, go to Inspect tab in the right in Figma, scroll down. I can ignore all styles related to position. You can also ignore all styles related to display flags, align items, and justify content. Those will never be guessed correctly. Those will never be correctly guessed automatically. You need to apply those rules meaningfully by hand. But the rest will be important for me. For example, we have color. You see, we have color with already with the color code that I need. I can copy it and paste for header icon. And also there are several pieces of code related to font. For example, we have line height, but well, we can copy paste it here, but in this case, it won't do anything. We have font size, like size of the font 16 pixels. 16 pixels is default, so it currently won't do anything here. But if it was different, for example, if it was 14 here, we will have to provide this value, because if the value you see here is a default one, you don't need to copy it into your code. For example, we have font style normal here. By default, all text in divs and spans and just a simple text, by default, it's all normal. So basically, you don't need to copy paste this one. Font style by default, it's normal, it's not italic. But font weight, by default, normal refers to the number 400. 700 is actually bold. So I can go and copy paste it here as well. And let's see if something is different on our page now. Okay, so you see that now text is gray as well. It's much closer to the design now. You can see that the font itself is different because as I already shown you, I have default font as Times New Roman in my system, but here in design, we have a font called Martel Sans. But we will ignore it for now because downloading and applying different font might take some time. So I'm not going to do it. So I'm okay that my font will be different from the one that we have in the design. So we are almost done here. There are just 2 more things to go. If you look at the menu icon, you see I don't see any border here, but here I see a border because there is a shadow around this icon. In order to see how to apply this shadow, I need to select the icon itself. I don't see it on the icon, so in Explorer I'm selecting. Okay, so probably shadow. Okay, so you see it's again another mistake of a designer. So usually we have a button here, and but in the styles of this button, I don't see any shadow, because if you look at the Explorer, shadow is provided on below the button as a separate layer, as a separate element. So I'm selecting this shadow, button shadow, and if I scroll down the code, I'm looking for a property called box shadow. Here it is. It has several values. I go ahead and just copy paste it. Copy paste, and where do I paste it? I need to provide this shadow for a menu icon. So in order to do that, first I need to provide some class to this image. Let it be menu icon. So I'm providing class for the image menu icon. So now I can reference it. I can safely reference it from CSS. I say for class menu icon, please add this shadow. I just copy pasted it from Figma. These three values define whether your shadow should be on the right, where it should be on the right and the left, on the top, bottom, how far it should spread from the element, and basically what should be the color of the shadow. And let's check our website. Okay, now we can see that shadow is applied, but the icon itself was exported incorrectly. It was exported not as a round icon, but as a rectangular icon. We can actually fix that by code. There is a separate property called border radius. If I select a button, I will see that here border radius is 25 pixels. Border radius, it's length of the curvedness of the border, because if the border radius is 0, you will have a perfectly rectangular element. If you provide some border radius, its angles will be rounded to a certain amount. So I'm copy pasting that and providing this code for menu icons, for a menu icon. But instead of 25 pixels, I will put a value of 50%. And actually 50% means like fully rounded border. Let's check it. Okay, now as you see, everything works perfectly fine. We have beautiful menu icon, we have icons for login and cart, we have logo, we have our header, which is 72 with a height of 72 pixels. And at this point, we are almost finished with creating the header. There is just one more thing that we need to do. If you take a good look at the layout itself, you will see that logo doesn't start at the very beginning of the page. Same as for right icons in the right, they don't start in the very end of the page. So there is left and right padding for the header. In the left, it is 92 pixels, and in the right, I'm selecting the most right element and then hovering the right border of the document. So let me select it. Again, here it's 92 pixels. So it means we have 92 pixels paddings for header. But let's go ahead and check some other sections whether we have this padding there or not. For example, we have our main section. Let's check the logo. 94, again, probably mistake of a designer, probably designer meant 92. Let's check next, restaurant section. You see, 92, same here. And on the right, 93, which is almost 92. For restaurants themselves, it's also 92. For specialties, it's also 92. So for the map, it's also 92, almost. Here it should be 92, and so you'll see that we will have this 92 pixel padding on the left and right for many different sections of our website, which means it won't be a very good idea to put padding left here 92 pixels, padding right 92 pixels, and then to repeat this code over and over again in each next section. Because, for example, at some point, if you design changes and you decide to increase or reduce this padding, you will have to replace these numbers in many, many different places. The better approach will be to create a separate class. Usually, this kind of element is called container, and I will transfer these paddings there. So now I have a separate class called container, which can provide this 92 pixel padding on the left and on the right of each element. And what the last thing I need to do now is go and for our header, provide two different classes, header and container, and that's it. I didn't say it yet, but you can provide several classes for several different classes for one element, as you see here in the example. You spell attribute class, and inside the value, you just mention two different words separated by a space. It means that header has both of these classes, and styles from both of them will be applied to the header. Let's check it. And as you see, it works perfectly fine. We have a great header that we created here. Header, at this point, I can say that header is fully done, and it's completely the same as we have it in the design. Well, except font type, but that's fine for us. We won't bother with it. Now we will go with the other sections. Any questions so far? Is everything clear? Put something, put plus in the chat. I want to see that you are not asleep yet. I know it's late, but it's even later here in Ukraine. We have 2 hours difference. So it's already 10:30 for me. Guys, put something into the chat. Plus, are you still here? Any questions? Is everything understood so far? Well, anyway, while you type in something, let's continue. So for now, we have created the first actual block, which consists of several sub blocks here. And now let's switch to the next section. That's actually I have shown from what I have shown you so far. This information would be enough for 80 to 90% of the layouts you will be working with. So you just need to apply these rules everywhere you work. So you start with breaking down the page into big blocks, big blocks that go one after each other, and then for each of those blocks you go deeper and divide them into smaller blocks, and so on until you finish with some text or images. Okay, so let's start with the next part, which is called main. So first div header is finished. Let's start with main. Yes, Armida was writing about recordings. The question about recordings. Yeah, you will receive the recording of the webinar, specifically of this webinar, tomorrow. All the recordings are posted in the WhatsApp group that you've been sent an invite. So the recording of the first webinar that was held on Monday is already there. So you can watch it. You could have been watched. You could have watched it already. Sorry. And this one will be available tomorrow morning. Okay, let's go next. Let's start with the next section. This one. Firstly, again, we are creating the HTML layout, and then we style it with CSS. So this part consists of 3 sub blocks, 3 big sub blocks. First one is the heading itself. Second one is these 2 buttons. And third one is these 3 tag elements. We also have an image here, but as you can see, image here overlaps with the text, and it firstly overlaps with the text of the heading, and secondly, it overlaps with this tag block below. when I select an image, you see that it overlaps here on the left and in the bottom. It means that image shouldn't be placed in a separate block. It should go to background, because if we place it in a separate block, we cannot allow blocks to overlap with each other. Actually, there is a possibility in CSS to overlap some blocks, but this is for some more complex layouts using the position property. We don't need that so far. It means that image will be put as a background of this block. So we have three sets of sub blocks for this main block, and we have a background image with which we'll deal later. Let's start with the HTML layout, and specifically first heading. Your food court at home. I create a first level heading and type in your food court. By the way, you don't actually need to type yourself all the text that you see in Figma, because this text is short. I can type it in certainly, but in the other cases, for some paragraphs, there can be like pretty big amounts of text. Here in the inspect sections, you have one of the subsections called content, and in the right you see this your food court at home, and in the right you have copy icon. If you click it, the text is automatically copied to clipboard, and you can just go to the code and paste it. So you don't need to type in everything manually. Okay, going back to the code. Firstly, we have a heading called your food court at home. It actually doesn't matter which tag specifically we use, H1, H2, or H3, but as this is the biggest text on our web page, it's okay to apply like the top level of heading tags for it. Next, we have these two buttons: delivery, ordering, takeout, grab and go. So, well, actually, I'm not sure if those are actually buttons. Let's make those as divs. I will put a div which will represent this whole block, like both of these buttons. Inside it, there will be two smaller divs, one for each button, and inside each button, there will be two more divs, one for the top row of the text and one for the bottom row. So for the first one, the top text says delivery, the bottom says order in. I will copy paste it, not to create two divs manually again. And for the second button, the top text says takeout, and bottom text says grab and go. And at this point, I think we finished with HTML layout for those. Okay, we can go next. And next we have the last div. Let's make it a bit closer so you can see it better. And lastly, we have the last div here, which is which we have this one div, which will have three more divs inside, one for each of those tags. We have div, it has three more divs inside. What I've done now is I press Ctrl plus D to duplicate the line that I've just created. So it allows me to type in code faster. And each of these items contains two parts. Left part is icon and right part is text, for which we need again two different blocks. Well, actually, first of them will be image. And the second one will contain some text. Let's copy text from here. Delivery in page. you see that it is sometimes copied with some unreadable symbols. Just ignore those. And I will copy this layout to the other two icons as well. I just need to replace the text. Free delivery from 29 euros. It's for the second one. Again, we don't need those symbols. And the last one, only fresh and French products. Okay, that's it. That's it. We are finished with this second section. As you can see, in HTML, it is all done very quickly. Of course, if you know how to split the content into these blocks and how to assign how many parts of these blocks to create inside your code. Let's take a look on how it will look like into the code. Well, first, let's provide the source. For the images, I believe that those will go inside icons as well. So first one is clock, second one is Motorola, and third one is Eiffel Tower from Paris. So first one should be clock. I suppose it's time it. Yes, it's time it. I don't need these ones so far. So the source is image folder. Inside it, we have icons, and inside it, we have time it. Second icon, as far as I remember, it is called delivery. There is a Motorola there, delivery PNG. And third one represents Paris for French products. EMG, icons, Paris, PNG. Okay, so now we are fully finished with the HTML layout for a second block. Let's take a look. So you see how the header looks without styles, and you can now remember how it was looking before the styles. And for the second part, without styles, it looks so ugly, but now we will make it beautiful. Okay, so let's start with the heading. And actually, what we need so far, most of the styles that we need to provide the header to looks like this, we will take and copy paste directly from Figma. So first, let's click on this element and check the bottom of the inspect tab, ignoring all the position, ignoring all the display. But we will probably need the rest, ignoring default values such as font style normal, font weight 300, we don't have that one, but it's also will be considered as default. What we need is font size and line height. Again, font size is its height of one letter, and line height it's a height of one line of text. If you line height should always be bigger than font size, because if those have same numbers, your lines of text will go just one after each other. If you have bigger line height, one line of text will have some paddings on top and on bottom. So I'll copy these two properties and apply them to my H1 tag. But in order to do that, I'm providing some class as well, even though I have only one H1 tag so far on the page, it will be still a good idea to always provide all the elements classes and style everything only in terms of classes, but not in terms of tags. Let's put class called main title, for example, because this is what it is. It's main title. And here I paste two lines of code that I copied from Figma. Let's check. Your food court at home. So now size of the text is perfectly fine. What is still different? First of all, it's not starting right below the header. You see, it has a vertical margin of 120 pixels. Figma shows us that here we have, well, actually it's not a margin, it's most likely padding. So let's create a padding of 120 pixels. Padding on, but we need this padding only on top, 120 pixels. Let's check. Okay, so we have this padding. Also, we have this padding at left. We have this padding on the left, but we already know what it is. I mean, we already have a special class that provides these 92 paddings on left and right for different types of content. So what we can do is go to our H1 and add one more class called container. As you remember, container provides left and right padding of 92 pixels to the content we apply it to. Okay, so now we have side padding as well. It's also is divided into two different lines. You see, the width of this element, it's not wide enough to fit all the page, because in our case, for any block elements, so you can see we have created paddings of on top, on right, and on the left. And for any blocks elements, and actually headings like H1 block elements, for any block elements, they by default take the width of the whole page. But we need to limit its width. What we can do is apply something like, I can apply width and put some specific value here, but I will rather apply max width. It means that it can be lower if, for example, we are viewing the page from a mobile, but not larger than, for example, 500 pixels. And let's see how it works. Okay, that's almost perfectly fine. We just need at home. We just need the word at to be on the previous line. Let's try to make the value lower. What about 450? No, if 400, well, 400 is perfectly fine for us. So I'm going to copy paste that into our code for main title, that its max width will be 400 pixels. And as you can see, I've applied these styles directly here in the browser. I've checked the value that I need. I modified it here, and only when I found what I was looking for, I went and copy pasted it into the code. It's always faster when you don't know the exact size yet, the exact size that you need. It's always faster to first try it in the browser inspector. Here you can create and add any new styles to any element. And then if you are fine with those, then copy paste it into your code. Okay, so first part is done, your food court at home. Now let's deal with the second part, these buttons, delivery and takeout. In order to style them, first we need to give them some class, and let us think of how to meaningfully name them. Well, let's call them tags. Let's call them tags, whatever. And we have two tags. They need to go into columns, not one below each other. That's why for tags, I'm putting in property display flex. Let's check. Okay, so we have delivery, takeout, ordering, grab and go. But the icons are still below. Let's check if we did everything correctly in HTML. Okay, sorry. Icons are for the info. Those images are for the info icons below. Everything is correct, so you can ignore those so far. So for text, everything is good. We have the first word on top, second one on bottom, and in the second column, we have another two messages. So here it is perfectly fine. So now let's provide them with some other styles. Firstly, you can see that, let's make it a bit closer. And firstly, you can see that those tags, they have two rows, and those two rows have different styles. So we have different font size here and below. It means that we need to style these rows separately, provide them with some separate styles. It means that I need to apply firstly class to each element here. It will be one tag, and this one will be a tag. And I also need to provide a class to the top and bottom row in order I can style them separately. And first one, let's call it tag name. And for the bottom part, let's call it tag details. And I'm copy pasting it to the second tag. So my styles will apply to both of them. Let's check. I've just provided classes. Nothing has changed so far. But what I can already do, I can provide some margins. You can see that these tags do not start at the beginning of the page. They also have this side padding of 92 pixels. So for those tags, I can also add this class container. And you see, we already have the side padding. And also they have a vertical margin between the heading and the tag itself. Let's try figuring out how much this margin is. So after selecting text, I can select the button itself, I mean this outer button, and upon hovering on the heading, I can see that the vertical difference between those are 88 pixels. So for tags, I can put something like margin at top, 88 pixels. And let's check. So you see now they're perfectly placed on the page. They're below the heading, like 88 pixels below the heading, and they have both left and right padding applied. That's good. Let's go further. And what else do we need to do with them? First of all, each of the tags has this yellow border. If I select the button itself, by default, I think you won't be able here to select the button itself. You see that this button border is not clickable, but you can select text, and then here on the left in Explorer, find the parent element, which is actually button itself. And for this button, we can see, for example, these two properties. We have border and border radius. You now know both of them. Border will allow us to create this border from all sides of the element, and border radius make it not rectangular, but makes its angles curved with the radius of 4 pixels, like small 4 pixels radius. Let me copy those and provide these styles for the component called tag, because those need to be provided for each of the tags. Let's see. Okay, that's already much better. But we need some spacing, because you see text doesn't go directly close to the borders. If you need some spacing between the content and the borders, it means that you need to add padding. And Figma here shows us how big this padding should be. If we select a button, we can see that it's 18 pixels on the top, and I suppose it should be 18 on the bottom, and it's 24 pixels on the left and on the right. So I'm providing this padding here, 18 pixels, 24 pixels. If I remember from the last time that what I told you, if you put a properties like padding and margin and provides several values, specifically if you provide two values, the first one will be applied to top and bottom, and the second one will be applied to left and right. If you provide all four values, those will be distributed clockwise, starting from 12 from the top. Like the first value will refer to the top, second one to the right, third one to the bottom, and fourth one to the left. Let's see. Okay, you see with each line of code, it looks better and better. Where else do we need to do? Let's check here. Okay, we need to put a spacing between, well, actually between these two buttons. It's about, if I have 48 pixels to text and 24 pixel padding inside, it means that the gap between them is 24 pixels. So for tags, I can put gap 24 pixels. Great, almost perfect now. Final two things. So firstly, text inside those need to be centered. As this is not flex item, like as text is not flex item, I cannot use align content, align items and justify content here. But for like simple text, I can use a property called text align. It's just used to align text inside some block. I put text align center for a tag. Now you see everything is perfectly centered. And the last thing I need to do for tags is to provide different styles for tag name and tag details. As far as I remember, I called them this way. Yes, tag name and tag details. So let's go ahead and create styles for them. We have tag name and we have tag details. For those, I will just copy paste values from Figma. So I'm selecting the name and I'm copying font weight, font size, and line height. I need just these three properties. And for the second one, for value, same. Well, font weight 400. 400 is normal default, so I don't need to copy it, but I need the other two properties and put it for tag details. And let's check. So as you can see, if not consider the difference in the font itself, so it looks perfectly as on the design. We have two perfect tags here. Now the last element is this info icons, and actually it's the same. It's almost the same. We have a little time. We have only 15 minutes left. So in order not to waste time, I will now create this part very, very quickly, because everything that I will do will be absolutely the same as we did for all the previous sections. So, and now you will see how fast you can write this type of code. So first, let's start with styling. And in order to style those, we need to provide some classes. For their container, I will call it info icons, and each of them will be info icon. There are 3 of them, so I'm duplicating the class. And each icon has text and image, but actually, well, actually, it doesn't matter for me. I think these styles will be enough. So we have info icons, and we will have some styles for one specific icon. For the icons, first you can see that for this all this block we have for this block we have padding on the left of the same 92 pixels, but we don't have this padding on the right. So we cannot use container class here. Instead, we just need to provide padding left here, 92 pixels. Okay, that's it. Then this big block contains 3 other blocks that need to go in columns. In order to place the content in columns, I put display flex. The distance between these blocks, here it's 46 pixels, here it's 40 pixels. Well, whatever, it's it should be the same. Let's put, for example, 40 pixels. It will be gap of 40 pixels. What else? Also, you will be able to see that we have a shadow. We have the shadow around this element. It's hardly seen because it's like very light shadow, but still it is there. And as far as I see, its angles are curved. That's why we need to apply also border radius. Let's see what Figma tells us. Base background. Where is that? I cannot find it. I cannot find what I need. I have this one block. Well, unfortunately, there is some mistake in Figma. Okay, here USP shadow. Here is the same. As you can see, the shadow is provided as a different element, because most likely in Figma, when some element has shadow, you click on the element and inside inspect, you will be able to find box shadow. But here it's placed as a separate element in Explorer. So it depends on your designer. I'm going to copy paste this box shadow. And also there is a border radius, but I don't see it here, maybe here. No, not here as well, not in the background, maybe for USP. No, that's weird. Again, some mistake in Figma, so just by my eye, I see that it is something around 4 pixels. So let's check what we did so far. Okay, it's almost good. Just let me try something. Okay, good. Instead of using display flex, so you see for info icons, if I use display flex, the element will take the width of the whole page. But in our case, its width is limited to the amount of its content. In order to do that, instead of display flex, there is such property also as inline flex. Inline flex means that you can still use all the properties of the flex box inside this element, but the element itself will be treated as an inline element, not as a block tag, but as an inline tag. It means it won't take the whole width of the page, it will take only the width of its content. Let's see. Okay, that's fine. Now we also need to provide styles for info icon, and those will be the following. Info icon itself, it should be a flex container because it contains like image and then text on the right, not below it. So that's why I'm putting display flex here. And we have a gap between image and text, a gap of 16 pixels. Gap of 16 pixels. Okay. We can also put align items center. So the text is centered. But now we need to find a way to put the text into 2 different lines. Well, there are several ways to do that. I'll show you one of those. One of those is to use specifically a line break tag in HTML. So unless should start from a new line. When you have some text, you can put a BR tag inside it. BR means line break. It breaks the text and transfers the next part to the next line. From also goes from the next line. It's not the best solution, but unfortunately we don't have enough time, only 7 minutes left, and we still need to create a background today. And in the third, we need to have a line break here before the word end. And let's see how it works. Okay, almost perfectly fine. Just few more things. We need to have margin from the top element, something like 280 pixels. So for info icons, I'm putting margin top 280 pixels. And okay, those are below here. Good. And also we need to have some vertical paddings here. And the amount and the size of that padding is 28 pixels, both on top and bottom. So we can do it the following way. We can put 28 pixels, 92, 28, 0. So it means that on top 28, on the right, well, actually we need vice versa. On the right we need 0, and on bottom 28 again, and on the left we need 92. So this would be the correct way. Let's check. Okay, and now I think it is good. Well, still we need some padding on the right, because it's not good when text finishes right in the end of the block. Let's put something like, I don't know, something like 24 pixels on the right. Okay, now it looks much better. The main part is almost complete. The last thing we need to do is to add this background image here. So in order to do this, we need to learn a few more properties related to a background. So I will go back to our example file, and I will put few more comments there so you can use them while doing some kinds of your homework. They all start with background / and there are such values as color. You already know that there can be background color. We already use that. That's easy. We can have background size. We can have background position. We can have background repeat, and we can have background image. And actually we will now use 4 of these to provide our background image correctly. So we need a background for this whole div. In order to do that, I need to give it some class. Let the class be called main as like the main page. And for main, I will put it right before the main title. I put it here. Actually, there is no difference where you put it in the CSS file, but I prefer when you have some structure where, for example, styles for the header are on top, for the main goes after them, and for example, styles for the footer are in the bottom of your file. This way you will be able to find some pieces of code more easily when you need to adjust this file later. Okay, so first of all, we need to provide background image for this file. And in order to do that, in order to provide a separate an image from the file, I need to reference its URL. And here I need to provide Here I need to provide a relative path from this file to the image. And in this case, this is important, put more attention to this. Here I need to provide a relative path, not from the file index.html, but from this CSS file to my image. In order to get from here to my image, what do I need to do? File called style CSS, where I'm working right now, it's contained within the CSS folder, and the image folder is outside. These two are sibling folders. Those two are on the root of my project. So in order to access file from some file contained within the CSS folder, I first need to go one level up. I showed you last time how to do it. So now I consider that your path inside the CSS folder. I need to go one level up, .. Now I went to the root folder. Inside the root folder, I'm going to the image folder. Inside image, I go to folder called background. And inside background folder, I have a file called background PNG, where I actually have my file. It's background PNG. So this would be the correct way, because otherwise, if you, for example, provide a path in a similar way that you did in HTML, it won't work. So you see, and IDE will highlight it in red that it's a mistake. There is no such file. You see, there is no background image. And if I put the correct path with going one level up before referencing the image folder, now everything is working perfectly fine. And here we have our page with a background. And here you can see some defaults that, again, the browser has for the backgrounds. If you provide an image as a background, and if the image is smaller than your block, this image will be duplicated, both vertically and horizontally. It will be duplicated as many times as big your block is. So in order to remove that repetition, I need to use a property called background repeat, and by default it says repeat. We can repeat it only horizontally, we can repeat it only vertically with repeat X or repeat Y, and we can disable all the repeating by providing a value called no repeat. I mean, I don't want any repetitions. And you see, repetitions have disappeared. Okay, that's great. What else do we need to do? Also, we need to provide some size of our image, which is provided with a property called background size. By default, as far as I remember, it is auto, but in most cases, you will change it to one of two values, cover or contain. If we put cover, what happens? It will, image will be resized in a way that it takes 100% like full space of your block. It is useful for web pages where you have some background image, for example, with some people or trees, some background image for some block. If the block gets bigger, the image will be resized, so no part of the block is empty. If you use background size cover, I mean, image will be resized and trimmed, so all the block is filled with the image. And the second option is contain. Contain means that image will be always shown in full. For example, for background size cover, let's see what the difference is. If I make if I make, for example, the page smaller, let it be like this. For example, if I make this block smaller, the image will become smaller as well. If we use contain, no matter how big or small your block is, the image will always be shown in full. It won't be trimmed at any direction, not from top, bottom, left, and right. You will always see the full image. And the last thing that we need here is background position, because by default it goes on the left. You can put center here, but in our case, image goes on the right. And if I close the page, you will see that if I provide background position as right, image is perfectly placed on the right. Of course, if you start making it smaller, it can go below the content. It can overlap with the content. That's actually fine, because for smaller resolutions you will need to provide some different styles. It might be a problematic, for example, for this block, you see, because it can overlap some text with this plate layout. So in order to avoid that, I can specifically indicate some background for my info text. For my info icons, for example, if I say here that I want background to be white, background color provided for some specific text, it will always be over the background image, and this way the image won't overlap specifically with this content. Okay, our time has already finished. So actually we did today a pretty huge amount of work. We created just 2 sections, but if you take a look at the code and take a look at all the other sections that we have here, those are very similar to what we have already created. For example, again, here we have block with the heading restaurants and the button named show all. We provide display flags to their parents and flag justify content space between, so they are pushed to different sizes of the page. That's it. The rest of the styles we will just copy from Figma. Here is the same. We have display flags with 4 different items and gap 24 pixels between each of them, and so on. So as you can see, the rest of the sections could be done in a very, very similar way. So what we already did today will cover like 90 to 95% of HTML and CSS layout that you might face in your life. Of course, there are much harder examples, much more complex examples, but for now, you need to just understand these basics. And if you understand these basics correct, then it would be like perfectly fine and easy for you to create the rest of the layout as well. Okay, let's finish for today. So what's our plan for Friday? On Friday, we will complete the 3rd section called restaurants. And here, as you can see, we have a slider where you have buttons on the left and on the right. With those, ideally, by clicking those buttons, you need to scroll the content of the slider right or left, like to show different restaurants, different meals. And that's what we do next time. Firstly, we will create HTML and CSS layout for this slider, and then we use JavaScript, and I will introduce you to some basics of JavaScript and JavaScript libraries. So we will use one of the JavaScript libraries to actually create the slider and to make it working. We will also put some logic to this show all button so it can collapse and expand some content on the page. Last but not least, if you want to practice at home, well, you have access to this design, but as I will be working on that, maybe you want something different. I have prepared a different link. I'm sending it now in the chat, and we'll send it also to WhatsApp group. I've sent it to a chat. It contains several different landing pages that you can practice on. For example, you can check the layout here, and the structure is almost similar to what we already did. We have header consisting of 2 parts. We have some main part. Here is the image, and here are some text and buttons, and some next sections again that you can create using Flexbox. So you can use that for practicing at home. Again, if you have some questions, please ask our mentor into the chat. Don't be shy. We are ready to support you in this process. And for now, thank you everyone for being here. Good night and see you on Friday. You're welcome. I suppose no technical questions so far because I don't see any of those. If not, probably let's finish the session. Yeah, guys, so see you on Friday. Good night.